Hi, everyone. I'm pleased that the Justice Committee, we're honored to have a distinguished panel today to discuss the criminal justice reform in Marin County. We have Lori Frugoli. She's been a prosecutor for the Marin County District Attorney's Office for 31 years and has served as our district attorney since January of 2019. Lori's prior experience as a police officer provides her with a unique perspective of the district attorney's office and their priorities. Recent developments in the office include participating in the creation and implementation of Marin County's first gun safety collaborative, Veterans Treatment Court, and returning sexual assault exams back to Marin. Brian Morris, who is going to be joining us fairly soon, he's the Marin County Public Defender's. He's been with the Marin County Public Defender's Office since 2001 and has tirelessly represented clients on cases ranging from misdemeanors to murder. His passion for the courtroom is enhanced by his innovative spirit and appreciation for new solutions. Brian was named Assistant Public Defender in 2015. In that role, Brian has cultivated a culture of collaboration with other county departments and with community organizations. Marlon Washington has worked in probation for approximately 24 years. And during his career, he has held the following positions: probation counselor, adult juvenile deputy probation officer, institutional supervisor, probation supervisor, institutional supervisor 2, juvenile hall superintendent in Napa, and most recently, our chief probation officer here in Marin. Becoming chief during the pandemic and social unrest has its own challenges. However, Chief Washington has embraced this challenge and stays abreast of legislative changes to ensure criminal justice reform in Marin. And last but not least, we have Carney, who's worked with youth for over 45 years. He started his career in 1975, directing group homes and educational services for wards of the court. In 2000, Don became the YMCA Director of Youth and Family Services, where he established the Marin County Youth Court, the Alcohol and Drug Safety Skills Harm Reduction Training, and alternatives to suspension based on the principles of restorative and trauma-informed practices. In July 2020, these services began operating as Youth Transforming Justice, an independent nonprofit organization, and Don is the executive director. Don now trains communities and schools in the practice of providing restorative trauma-informed alternatives to suspension and juvenile incarceration. So we'll start with Lori.
Thank you. And I think we have a short video we're going to play, or have people already seen the video?
Nope, we're going to show it now.
Okay, thank you.
There's been a lot of attention on district attorneys lately and the prosecutor's role in the criminal justice system. But you might not know all the things the DA does, the limits on the DA's power, and the ways the DAs have already been changing their approach to prosecution in recent years. The DA's #1 responsibility is keeping our community safe. We do that in 3 basic ways that we call the 3 Ps. Prosecute criminals who break the law, work to prevent crimes from happening in the first place, and protect and support victims of crime and make sure their voices are heard. When you think of the DA, you probably think prosecutors. While that's a big part of our job, the power we have to hold criminals accountable is carefully defined by the law and our ethical responsibilities. When someone's arrested, we carefully review the facts and the evidence. We can only file the criminal charges we believe we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Our job includes protecting the rights of the innocent, as well as those we charge with the crime. Then, the case moves through the justice system, which provides checks and balances and accountability. Public defenders, criminal defense attorneys, and judges all play a role in how the case will resolve. Prosecutors alone don't determine a person's punishment if they're convicted. That's up to a judge and jury once we've proved our case. Our goal is always fair and equal justice for everyone, but also justice that's smart and reflects the needs of our society and the will of the people. As prosecutors, we also have the ability to give people second chances. That's why we work with special courts that steer people away from jail, still hold them accountable, but get them the help they need to break the cycle and stay out of jail. Help like mental health treatment, finding a place to live, or kicking a drug or alcohol addiction. We also support restorative justice programs that help offenders understand the harm that they've caused to a particular victim or community. That's one way we prevent crime, but there are lots of others. We work with youth to help them make good choices and stay in school. We support programs that help people who are coming out of prison to find jobs. And we let the public know how to recognize and report crimes like child abuse, elder abuse, sexual assault, and human trafficking. The third big part of our job is protecting and supporting victims of crime. In a typical year, the DA's office comes into contact with thousands of victims, and we help them in lots of ways. We help get them emotional support for the trauma they suffer from having a child or loved one murdered, or the emotional pain from a violent crime like rape. We help victims even when we can't file charges against the person who hurt them. We sometimes even use therapy dogs to help them testify in court and tell their story. Arf. We do all of this on behalf of you, the people. And we're accountable to you and to the laws of the state of California. Those laws are always changing to keep criminal justice priorities in line with changes in society and technology. We embrace reform, but we'll always work to make sure change happens in a way that continues to keep our neighborhoods.
So thank you. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. Thank you for playing that video. We received that as a gift from the San Diego District Attorney, Stephan, who really has been at the forefront of really helping district attorneys across the state demystify for the public what district attorneys can do, can't do, and what our job commitments really are, and our commitment to equity and social justice. So I always thank Stephan for the gift of that video. I think it does explain on a broad level what DA's offices do and what our office does. So the district attorney here, I'm honored to be your district attorney, and I've served as your district attorney since January of 2019. And as Nancy mentioned, I've been in the office over 31 years. So I've seen a lot of our initiatives and laws and priorities come full circle to, I think, to the benefit of our community and our youth in particular. So as the chief law enforcement officer, that doesn't mean that I have police officer powers. I did previously, I don't now. None of my attorneys do. The only staff in my office who have peace officer powers to arrest people are my investigators. So we get most of our cases from law enforcement through arrest reports or requests for charges to be filed. So in 2020, we received about 2,800 cases to review for criminal charges. There are a lot more people who were contacted by law enforcement during that year and every year. And if it's a traffic sort of stop that either doesn't result in a referral to my office with a request for criminal charges, if it's a general speeding, traffic violation, those kind of contacts that are a vast majority of contacts of people, particularly of color with law enforcement, go through the traffic court, and my office does not maintain that data. So that's something that a lot of people don't understand when we're talking about contacts with law enforcement. If it ends up in a situation where a case is, somebody's arrested and it's referred to my office, then I will see that case. So there's a new law that's going into effect that some of our agencies have already started keeping track under the RIPA law, RIPA law, of the race of people that they stop and why they're stopping them. And that data is currently being maintained by the Department of Justice of the state of California. And your Tiburon Police Departments, Mill Valley, and the Sheriff's Office have already onboarded that process and are making that data available to the public on their website. So that information, to be clear, is going to be different than the information that my office has. We have, in our commitments to transparency, put a dashboard, a transparency dashboard on our website with some input from a community group that we work with. And we're one of the few DA's offices in the state that work with a community group of activists and leaders and people from a variety of groups to really have a seat at the table in my office and question us and understand each other about what my office does, how we handle certain cases, why we make the decisions that we do. And we've had many meaningful conversations since 2019, and we're going to continue that process because it's important to have a voice from the outside community at the table in our office. And I'm honored to commit to that. And also our transparency data on our website reflects some of the input of that group, as well as other decisions that we've made. So check out our website if you want to see the updated data that we have. Some future initiatives we're looking at, we're working with Stanford University, who is reviewing our arrest and conviction and filing data right now for disparities. And if they find that we qualify, we are going to be able to participate in a blind race program where all incoming police reports that are under consideration for review of criminal charges will have important information redacted from them. And that important information is information that could result in a bias on the part of the person screening the report. So that report would actually, for the purposes of filing, redact the race, the color of the person's hair, who arrested them, where they were arrested, what the police department was. And so the decision would be made by the filing deputy without having that information. They would document their decision, and then the rest of the case would be opened up to show factors that I mentioned that are previously redacted, as well as whether or not the person's on probation or has committed prior offenses. And so if the DA, deputy district attorney, changes their mind on the filing process, then they document that. And Stanford will help us document that and really give some transparent information to the county and the people we serve as to whether or not we are disparate in how we file charges. And also it would be clear that we didn't file charges based upon a person's race. And so we're hoping to qualify for that program. We're also working now with another program called Measures for Justice, which would track those cases once we do file them. So they keep track of how long a person's in custody before they go to trial or plead guilty, how much time they spend in custody. Are people of color treated disparately once the case is filed within the system? Are we making consistent offers in cases? Are people of color getting less opportunities for diversion or other opportunities for justice courts? And so it's another way of accountability and also transparency that we're working with this program, Measures for Justice. And again, we're hoping to get that on board right now. We have already received authority and the monies from the county with great support from the Board of Supervisors for the staff to enter that data so we can begin that process. So we're excited about that. We have some other firsts that we've done here in the county. And one of those is starting, as Barbara mentioned, our Marin County Gun Safety Collaborative. That again is a group of community people, including some, if not everybody who's here on our call today. And I think the point that today, the point for me and the honor of being in front of you is for everyone to really appreciate how your justice partners do work together for the betterment of the safety of our community. And, you know, to Don's point on his t-shirt, the focus really is on people, not prisons. It's on accountability. And can we find ways to have a person be accountable, help them not reoffend, figure out why they offended in the first place, and also have the victim have a say, a meaningful say in that process. So that's one first that we're excited about. We also have an immigration specialist in our office that helps people with pre-trial, already filed, and post-judgment cases. And so again, focusing on accountability, but helping them avoid immigration consequences if we can. We also have our first Veterans Court, which we launched with, again, community justice partners. So we're really happy to be working with other community members. We're going to be starting a hate bias response to hate crimes in our community, again, with community members. We're going to be one of the few DA's offices that's going to have a specialized investigator to work on those cases and work with our community on educating, especially our youth and people in certain areas of our county about the problems with hate crimes and how we can prevent them as a community and stand forward and stop hate. And we also are together with Dawn, who I think started the Juvenile Justice and Anti-Delinquency or Delinquency Prevention Commission, and hopefully he'll talk a little about them and their work. And we also are the co-chair of the Coalition End Human Trafficking. And I think other than that, I would just invite people to maybe early next week, check out our website. We're going to be releasing a community bulletin with a lot of this data and information on what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And please come by and visit our office. We do not, like other offices, have pictures of the older white men who were the district attorneys and the leaders of the justice system from this perspective in our office. It is an extremely colorful and diverse presentation of photos of United Against Hate, Not in Our Town, Brady, Moms Demand Action, and anti-trafficking, pictures of anti-trafficking victims across the nation, actually. So we're proud that our front office represents our commitments to the community and really where our values stand. So other than that, I think I will stop and give the opportunity to my other justice partners. And thank you so much for allowing us to be here today.
Well, thank you, DA Frugoli. I guess it's my turn now. I'm Marlon Washington, the Chief Probation Officer, and I thank you for providing a map of the services connecting all our criminal justice partners. If I could get a thumbs up, you guys can hear me. I wasn't pinned yet to be in the speaker view. And I know some of you guys know about probation, but our mission is to further justice and community safety and to hold offenders accountable while promoting their rehabilitation. Probation in criminal law is a period of supervision over an offender ordered by the court instead of serving time in custody, which also includes supervision of those conditionally released from prison or parole. Our probation officers and our juvenile correction officers are trained to safely connect system-involved individuals to supports they need, whether it be mentoring and pro-social activities, education, employment, as well as evidence-based programming and rehabilitation, family support, and health and wellness. As you know, probation collaborates with the courts, the district attorney, the public defender, health and human services, and other local law enforcement agencies. One may wonder how probation is involved with criminal justice reform, but probation is an integral part of several specialty courts. For instance, drug court, family violence court, our STAR court, which is when you hear STAR, you're like, what is that? It's support and treatment after release. And more recently, as Laureate mentioned, our Veterans Treatment Court is a collaborative, as well as our Mental Health Diversion Court. In addition to these specialty courts, we have a robust pretrial program, which we utilize a risk assessment instrument to determine the level of supervision. Individuals are released from custody on different levels of supervision, to include, but not limited to, the use of electronic monitoring. Recently, and I love to talk about legislation. So we have, and it would be AB 1950, but it's Assembly Bill 1950, which reduced probation terms for misdemeanors to 1 year and felonies to 2 years, which required a review of all these cases. And in some cases, we had early terminations, and we worked with other criminal justice partners with reducing these. There were some exclusions to this. However, with the reduction of timeframes to work with our clients. So at one point you heard me say offender, sometimes we'll say clients, we may say an individual. But with these timeframes being reduced, we must engage clients earlier to connect them to services. The challenging part, which legislation didn't or doesn't address, was the idea of dosage and engaging in the fidelity of the evidence-based programs that have been developed. So with those various timeframes to engage someone, because often it takes months to engage someone depending on their offense with certain services. So unfortunately, we have these invisible barriers that come with legislation if you don't look at it fully. So I always like to say this: probation is like the linchpin of law enforcement. We're very vital to all these collaboratives. And I wanted to talk about, just highlight a few things for probation and not take too much time. But probation supports an integral part of the Marin 9 to 25. So 9 to 25 is actually an action-oriented collective of Marin County youth and adults dedicated to realizing positive and equitable outcomes for youth aged 9 to 25, like the name says. The aim is to ensure that all young people in Marin County can meet their physical, mental, and social health needs. In addition to that, probation has its own restorative justice program. And so a lot of people talk about restorative justice, and restorative justice is a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in an offense and collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations to heal and put things right as possible. Restorative justice is actually an approach. It is not particularly a program or a blueprint, not exclusively for young offenders and less serious offenses, not necessarily an alternative to the criminal justice system or incarceration. That is not easy just for a slap on the wrist, you know. The program aim is to provide a diversion level of services for persons charged with lower level crimes in the adult system. It also offers a restorative process for those to participate with the victims of their crime. And I always say, in making them whole. And restorative justice programs currently work with misdemeanor and felony cases. The last thing I would really like to highlight before I step away and pass it on to one of my partners is our youth programs. And we have a Youth Working for Change program that is funded by the probation department. And there's internships and job searches that we do to assist our probationers and other at-risk youth. We do site placements that include small businesses, skilled trades, nonprofits, and government agencies, and we do workforce preparation. And then we have our Career Explorers program, which is, I'm so excited about that. That program actually, it expands youth understanding and knowledge of the available employment opportunities here within the county. We have 22 departments, and we look at educating them on the future and learning about what we do here. And it's part of our equity program tied to the county's 5-year business plan. And it's open to youth ages 16 to 22. And we actually have interns placed throughout the county in our various departments. So what I would like to say is that with this collaborative effort, the goal in collaborating and working together is to improve community public safety while bringing improvements to the experience of those who are involved with the criminal justice system and to reduce recidivism. So not only do we do a lot of prevention and intervention and engagement, we work collaboratively to reduce the likelihood of people being impacted in the community. So with that, I would like to pass it on. I don't know if Brian has arrived yet, but I would love to introduce Don Carney, as we also work very closely with the Youth Transforming Justice.
Brian is on board, I think, though. Let's go to Brian. Brian, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready to go. And Marlon, sorry to stop your introduction of Don. I'll be able to do that for you, hopefully. I want to say, first of all, I'm Brian Morris, Assistant Public Defender, and thank you so much for having us here today. We really appreciate it. And I think it is an interesting time in criminal justice because we actually are working together in a way that I don't think has happened before in Marin County. And I think what Marlon had just discussed is what we're doing. It's focusing on common ground that we have and on common goals that we have. And it's surprising how many common goals that we share and how much common ground that we have. And I think what we've discovered is that all of our criminal justice partners are compassionate and want each individual that is in the system to be to have a better life, whether they need help with mental health or substance abuse or housing or whatever their needs might be. Everyone in the system is interested in getting that person into a better space, because I think if each person in the criminal justice system has an improved life, it is much less likely that there's going to be that person will be involved in the criminal justice system in the future, which of course would make for a safer community. And so I think with that in mind, we have all decided that we can work together and trust each other and do business in a way that has led to excellent results. Marlon had mentioned AB 1950. We all work together and incredibly hard, and specifically the probation department and some of the members in that office had really done the laboring ore of the work in the research and figuring out what probation terms could be terminated. And I think it ended up being well over 1,000 cases that the probation was terminated early based on a new law. So that kind of work together is excellent. We also have done a number of mental health initiatives just from nothing. We've worked on them together and created a mental health court called Pathways, which was very successful and did exactly what we had mentioned earlier, which is look at each individual and what their needs might be and address those needs. And we saw excellent improvement in people's lives and engagement in the community for those people. So it was very, very successful. And then even very recently, there was some misunderstandings about how to do OR reports. And so reached out to probation, and we worked together directly with the probation department and figured out what exactly the issue was. And we came to a great resolution because we're able to do that. We're able to call each other and say, this is some business that I would like to do. Let's see what kind of a solution we can come to together. Another thing that Marlon had mentioned is expanding restorative justice. I think all of us also would like to see fewer people in the criminal justice system. By the time they come to us, I think it's too late. Something has gone wrong. So the more preventative work that we can do and the more preventative avenues that we can find together, I think the more success that we will have. Specifically in our office, we noticed a gap in services during the pandemic for monolingual Spanish speakers, and we actually got a grant to address helping monolingual Spanish speakers. So one of the ideas that came directly from the employees of our office is to have a DMV liaison for people who have a lot of difficulty working with the DMV. I'm sure all of us have a lot of difficulty working with the DMV. But we have somebody now who is an expert who's going to help people get their licenses back and help them get into a DUI school. And this is going to help stop the revolving door of not being able to pay fines and getting in trouble for that and driving on a suspended license and then getting caught. It's just an endless loop. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. We're also using those funds. We're going to work towards helping people in federal court who actually do face removal proceedings after ICE gets involved. So we have an immigration attorney also that works in our office that works directly with the immigration specialist in the DA's office to try to find, well, at least from our perspective, to try to find resolutions that don't have negative immigration consequences. And then if someone does end up in removal proceedings, we're working to get them an attorney so they're not just left on their own after having their county case, the Marin County case, finished. I think Marlon stole some of thank you, Marlon, stole some of the things I wanted to say. But the main focus of this discussion is I think that this county is actually on the cutting edge of criminal justice reform, and it's based on the trust and the forward-thinking leaders in the justice departments. And I just wanted to, again, I try to, as much as I can when I get the opportunity, say thank you to my justice partners, because we're doing really good things for the community and for our clients. Oh, Dawn, I'll give you
Thank you.
should I give
Thank you,
Dawn an
Brian.
intro, or you got it, Nancy?
Yeah.
All right.
Next, we're going to have Dawn for youth transforming justice.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Lee. So I'm going to go back to when I worked in a group home for wards of the court for 10 years between 1975 and 1985. And because we started as a group foster home and then quickly became a state licensed group home, we lived with these kids 24/7, 365. And the opportunity that provided was priceless. We learned to do restorative circles and trauma-informed care organically before either of those terms were coined in the juvenile justice world. Fast forward, I was doing some support work at County Community School during zero tolerance. And zero tolerance at school was feeding that school to prison pipeline aggressively. So the Juvenile Justice Commission, of which I'm currently a co-chair and I've been on it for 20 years, was looking for an alternative. So we found programs called youth courts. And the way all youth courts start is the DA and the public defender come in and they teach young people how to play the adversarial superior court model, law and order. And I had very well-meaning, compassionate, empathetic Marin kids prosecuting kids who were traumatized. And they felt that they were a success because when they prosecuted, they got a hefty sentence. And it just broke my heart. They re-traumatized a young person who had already been traumatized. So I collaborated with them and said, listen, this adversarial model for young people is a win-lose model. We have to find a win-win model. So we did a deep dive collaboratively as adults and young people together and found restorative practices and trauma-informed care. And we profoundly changed the procedure in our court. Our court is not an adversarial framework. It's a support framework. And we were the first youth court in the state to do that. And luckily, that's a trend that's now being replicated with youth courts throughout the state because of its efficacy. One of the things we did early on, we adopted a public health model for juvenile justice. And that means we're trying to shrink the drivers of what puts young people into juvenile justice. And one of them was school suspensions. And we saw that clearly during zero tolerance. So we moved upstream a couple of years after we started. We started in 2004. And in 2006, we started with the Novato School District, which had a deplorable history of suspensions. They were on the radar throughout the state for high level suspensions, particularly of young people of color. And we started diverting suspensions in schools. So over the years, I've taught every school in Marin County how to divert suspensions using a restorative practice internally. We also paid attention to about 65% of the cases we get are substance involved. And because Marin's an affluent community, affluence and access to substances is rampant. And that increases access for young people who aren't affluent as well. I've had the unfortunate opportunity to attend 38 memorials for young people in Marin County in the past 15 years. So we ran a really robust harm reduction training program. 6 hours of that is with the kids and their parents. And then the other 6 hours is in 2-hour increments just with the young people. And what we really do is we look at environmental prevention and get the young people to support a concept of changing the environment that drives the substance use. And part of that is addressing trauma-informed care early. One of the things we do that's really unique in our harm reduction training is we train young people to be, young people are each other's first responders when they're up to mischief that leads to tragic consequences. So we teach them how to be effective first responders. We teach them how to know if a young person's going to stop breathing because of an alcohol overdose, or if they're just going to have a hangover. We teach them how to use Narcan for an opiate OD. We teach young people how to not be, young women how not to be sexually assaulted. We teach young men how not to be assaulters. So we cover all the big dangers that substance creates for young people. And I have had my young people report to me that they have saved dozens of lives through what they've learned in our training. So that's one of the best aspects of what I do. Then we moved upstream again quite recently with the San Rafael School District. The San Rafael School District, out of equity issues and concerns, has really invested deeply in restorative practices. Their community is highly impacted by over-policing and disproportionate minority contact and confinement historically. So one of the things we do in San Rafael is what's called community building circles. And these community building circles is the framework for creating a restorative culture in a school. And last year we got enough funding to pilot that process in the middle school. And it was really successful. This year we're piloting it in the elementary school. And what community building circles allow us to do is for 20 minutes twice a week, young people sit in a circle and share their life outside of school with the people, the other students in the class, and with their teacher. And the teacher has to also share their life with the young people to model that. And this sharing starts incrementally with simple, easy kinds of shares, but quickly as trust builds, it develops. It develops to the extent where a young person can talk and say, I'm worried about my math test this afternoon because my dad came home drunk again last night and I was afraid my mother and father were going to be fighting again and I couldn't focus. This allows us to identify early childhood experiences that are adverse, ACEs. And adverse childhood experiences creates what's called toxic trauma. And kids who have experienced toxic trauma act that trauma out in behaviors that are problematic. And we tend to punish trauma in our culture rather than heal it. So identifying this trauma in elementary school with young people allows us to start healing that trauma really early before they start acting out and before that trauma is punished rather than healed. And I'm a big proponent of ending intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma is what has filled our prisons. People act out who are traumatized. And if we continue to punish them for that trauma, they will continue to act out. We need to heal trauma, not punish it. Some other initiatives that we're really excited about. We received funding from Probation, the Board of Supervisors, and San Rafael City Schools to actually have paid Latinx interns as volunteers in the youth court system. About 2 years ago, San Rafael Police Department closed its Youth Service Bureau. And in about 6 weeks, our demographic shifted from about 65% Caucasian to 65% Latinx. And we had a lot of well-meaning white young people working with a lot of Latinx kids. And we wanted Latinx kids to be able to work with Latinx kids. But they didn't have the same opportunities the white kids had. The white kids were building college resumes, and they were there for authentic reasons as well. But their parents subsidized them. The Latinx kids mostly have to have part-time jobs to take care of themselves and their families. So now we are paying them the going rate for the kind of jobs they get part-time to work with us. And this is a really exciting initiative to have these young people explore a career in social justice. We are a social justice program. We're trying to balance the scales for who gets roped into first the juvenile justice situation, and that's a very sticky environment. Young people, if they end up in juvenile justice, quite often end up in adult justice. So we're really interested in ending that school to prison pipeline and breaking that intergenerational train of trauma. Another thing that we've done it with our collaborators, and these are Lori, some of the judges, Judge Wood from Juvenile Court. We're putting together a suggestion around how police should be involved with school districts. We think that there ought to be a relationship between the administration and law enforcement that will address serious crimes on campus. Drug charges on campus should be addressed by referrals to Youth Transforming Justice. The biggest call for police on campus is 5150s. And we have to really lobby for more funding in that arena, because right now the emergency response people who handle 5150s don't have enough resources to handle the schools. And it is really traumatic for a kid who has a 5150 to be perped, walked, handcuffed, and put into a squad car on their campus to have their mental health concerns addressed. Now, there is some legislation in the legislature to have school officials be able to handle 5150s, but right now it's exclusively law enforcement's responsibility. So we're doing a lot that's restorative and trauma informed. The probation department and the DA have been great about allowing us to do as much as possible. We often take what's called wobblers. These are cases that could be charged as felonies or misdemeanors. And quite often charges drop to a misdemeanor because the authorities feel that a peer review would be substantially more impactful than a systems review. And I want you to understand that we are not soft on crime. Young person that comes to us, number one, has to accept accountability for the violation and has to be willing to repair whatever harm was created and whatever relationships were impacted. And we create a restorative plan in collaboration with them. So we never do things to kids, we always do things with kids. And what that creates is what I call authentic accountability rather than begrudging accountability. And to date, we've kept about 1,400 kids out of the juvenile justice system. We've diverted literally thousands and thousands of suspension days. And we're really looking forward to healing a lot of childhood trauma in the elementary grades, so young people can experience a positive experience in school without needing to act out to let the adults know they're traumatized. So that's my story.
Thank you, Don. Can you explain 5150? That's one of the questions.
Oh, that's a call for mental health services. And the Juvenile Justice Commission did an exhaustive study of the past 3 years of every SRO interaction in every public school in Marin. And the largest interaction was around 5150s. The second largest was around substances. And we think both of those can be handled differently. We don't have to burden law enforcement with handling those. Law enforcement should be on campus when there are very serious crimes, like you would call law enforcement when there's a serious crime in your community.
Thank you, Don. Please put your questions in the chat box. I also have a question for Marlon, because we were talking about the 9 to 25 probation. And I'm assuming 9 to 25 are the ages that you're referring to. And so 9 years old, I mean, how does a 9-year-old get into the system besides having possibly a mental health issue and something bad has happened?
Well, and not necessarily is it only about a kid that is criminally justice involved, but it's to provide services. Remember, there's a school to prison pipeline, And I'm not for sure if everyone is aware of that. And they do studies as early as, kindergarten, first grade to determine on building facilities. So it's engagement not only for criminally involved youth or young adults, it's more so the services that can be provided to those that might have impacts on housing, homelessness, and different things like that that can impact the youth. There
Right.
were, and I hope I answered your question. There were two collaborative things that I wanted to mention that I failed to mention. And I know Don Carney, it just spoke to me when we have a SLEP program, which is the School Law Enforcement Partnership. And we do work closely with the schools with MCOE to kind of network and develop things for youth. And what was spearheaded by Mr. Otis Bruce, the assistant DA, and Mr. Liddell Dangerfield out of the Public Defender's Office is a speaker series of going around and talking to youth and engaging them with regards to what we do as criminal justice partners. And it's one of the first experiences of people seeing 3 African Americans in leadership positions participating and engaging people of color with regards to conversations, with regards to law enforcement and our criminal justice field. So I just wanted to mention that. I would be remiss not to mention that work that is being done out in the community and with the schools.
Yeah, thank you. If everybody could turn their view to gallery view. We also have Liddell and Bruce on the line, and they might want to speak a little bit about what they're doing. Sorry,
if I could right before that, just correct. I think I misstated when I looked at a column of my statement earlier. We received in 2020, 2,800 cases to review, and we filed 6,800 of them. And we received, pardon me, over 2,900 cases for review. So I think I misspoke when I talked about that number, and I wanted to clarify that. And I think it would be great for people to hear about the collaboration in the schools of Liddell and Marlon.
And Otis. Yeah, sorry. I don't know if Otis is still on, but Liddell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to just briefly share what we are involved in. I guess this morning was a perfect example. We spoke to 3 street law classes at Tam High School with Mr. Pribble, just covering different topics that we're addressing as criminal justice partners to better cooperate and collaborate so that people are overall just throughout the community made safer, made healthier, that we keep healthy lines of communication open so that we can problem solve instead of always being at loggerheads about every topic you can imagine. And it's been really productive experience, and I'm just happy to be in collaboration with Marlon and Otis around just issues that the community faces, and to try and, as I said before, come up with solutions and not just always prepared to fight over the things that we don't need to fight about. So thank you.
Good. And I see that Otis, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, briefly, thank you, Ms. Weber, and thank you, the League of Women Voters. I'm honored to, number one, to work along with Lori and the leadership of this county in protecting and serving the people of the county of Marin as assistant DA. There's a movement across the country, as you all know, in the Bay Area and Marin County about reform and equity and social justice. And they talk about systemic institutional racism. And what does that really mean? And those students, high school, middle school, high school, college, and those in transition as professionals, when Marlon and Liddell and I speak, they ask us very intricate questions about how is it to be an African-American man or those women or people of color we know to be working on the inside of the justice system. What does collaboration really means? How do we work together to see someone move out of the justice system? How do we work to do crime prevention, protection, and prosecution of cases collaboratively, how we save the taxpayers money and work in ways not to prosecute a case, but send a case through diversion. Or how do we take a juvenile case where Marlon Probation Department evaluates it and try to keep it from getting caught up in the justice system with our juvenile prosecutor. It is so important that we represent on all levels in this county, especially the county with the population and the cultural makeup that it has. And historically, it's never existed in this county. I've been in this county 30 years, 35 years total, but I've been working in the Civic Center 31 years with Lori. And there's never been African-American professional relationship or communication or platform or panelists like we are doing between Marlon and I, and Liddell. So I'm pretty proud of this. It is making a big difference. We've spoken to Terra Linda High School, the peer resource group. We've gotten invitations to speak outside of Marin to some other jurisdictions also. So collaboration works. Reform starts from inside, and the system is only as good as the persons who are leading it and representing you all.
Thank you, Otis. I also had a question about the immigration specialist, Bori. And then Brian mentioned that he had an immigration attorney. So I was curious, is there only one specialist on board, and what does their work involve? How many cases are they handling?
We each have an immigration specialist within our department because within our each departments, because we do have different lanes that we stay in. However, to everyone's point today, as we work together, if we can reach accountability and have it be good for the person to not have immigration consequences. So the public defender does their work and determines if a person does have immigration consequences, then they'll contact, we have a team of DAs here in the office, and then they meet and confer with our specialists and determine whether or not we can find an immigration safe disposition in whatever case is presented to us. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think they're on our website, and I'll see if I can grab them for you. And Brian might have that, I'm not sure. But it's important work, and we also work together and jointly outside of COVID have given community presentations to lawyers and community members and to really help them understand all the immigration law changes that there are, and that we've also seen, I think, a big shift, not only in the community, but in the entire justice system on appreciating that we need to be using these laws to the best that we can. I'll let Brian talk about his specialist.
Thank you. Yeah, our immigration attorney is a fixed term currently, so it's basically a pilot program. And what our immigration attorney does is often does an intake interview with someone who is not born in the United States to figure out exactly what their immigration consequences are, if any. And then we'll work with the criminal defense attorney who is assigned that case to advise that attorney about the best possible immigration consequences and try to come up with a resolution that is the least damaging for their immigration consequences. And then, as I mentioned, now we're having the ability to continue on with that service into the federal court if in fact that's where someone ends up going. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I did run a report recently, so I'm thinking I'm going to be pretty close. Our immigration attorney has at least touched and analyzed 600 cases, and at least 600 in the last year and a half. So this is a very robust and necessary aspect of the work that we do at the public defender's office, and the relationship that our immigration attorney has with the immigration specialist at the DA's office is also excellent. And they often are able to find resolutions by working creatively together that help mutually help clients that we have.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any other questions?
There's a question in the chat, Nancy.
Mhm. Okay, let me get it. San Rafael Police. Let's see.
From Linda.
From Linda Jackson. San Rafael Schools is talking with San Rafael Police about protocols for police on campus or school resource officers. What advice do you have for an MOU about local police and schools? Don?
Yeah, so the Juvenile Justice Commission was very lucky to be working with a San Rafael police officer, Scott Eberly, who is on the commission. And Scott motivated this study to analyze every SRO interaction on every public school campus for a 3-year period. And we learned an enormous amount from that research. And as I said, the number one reason was 5150s. Number 2 was drugs. Number 3 was, fights among kids, that kind of thing. And more of the traditional teenage mischief kind of things. And the recommendation we wanted to make was that this concept of the school resource officer being a mentor, a counselor, a paraprofessional MFT, all of that was, we felt that was not very accurate. 40 hours of extra training as a school resource officer doesn't provide that individual with depth in any of those areas. And quite recently, they were put on campuses to counsel kids on vaping because there was money for vaping in the justice system and they targeted it that way. So what we suggested is that we find a more appropriate way to address the 5150s. As I said, no young person likes to be perp walked off a campus when they're having a breakdown. It just compounds their trauma. The drug thing can be handled on campus. Generally, what was happening is young people would get panicky. They would feel like they were going to be sent to juvenile hall because they don't know what procedures are. So they'd resist the search by school security. And school security under statute can search a kid under probable suspicion, a much lower threshold than probable cause in the community. So we're encouraging school officials to do that search. And we're encouraging a messaging campaign to the students that relax, let them search your backpack. You're not going to go to juvenile hall. You're not going to be arrested. You're going to be referred to Youth Transforming Justice and receive a restorative process, as well as 12 hours of harm reduction training. So what we are suggesting that law enforcement develop relationships with the administration, not the students. And that the administration calls law enforcement onto campus for serious issues, as you would call law enforcement to your home or your community for serious criminal issues that are threatening life or property. So we think that could be a model. One of the things that Superintendent Hogelboom very astutely said is that we've got to have some young people's input on this. So he's going to be bringing it up at the next superintendent's meeting. And I'm hoping to have input on this process from young people throughout the county, not just the San Rafael School District. And I'm hoping that the San Rafael model gets accepted and becomes a model for all the school districts. Having a law enforcement officer on campus, there was just a terrible tragedy in Long Beach where a school law enforcement officer got a little over aggressive and shot into a car with students in it who were leaving the scene of what he perceived to be a crime, and he ended up killing a young mother. So I don't think there's a place for armed people on campus. I think what that does is that trains young people that we can't resolve our problems without armed authority, and we certainly can. Mediation, restorative practices can resolve issues quite handily. We don't need armed people to reinforce the concept that, ultimately it takes arms to resolve issues. And for kids from over-policed communities like the Canal, a police officer in uniform with a weapon triggers their trauma. And these kids are carrying significant trauma anyway. We don't need to compound it. And I don't begrudge these young officers who want to do good things for kids who happen to be in law enforcement. They are good individuals with well-meaning intentions. It's just that the structure of the institution compromises their best interests in dealing with young people. So we would like to have that money spent elsewhere. I mean, we actually pay a school resource officer more than we pay a therapist on campus. So I don't think that's a prudent expenditure of our tax dollars.
Okay, thank you, Don. Thank you to all our panelists today, Lori, Brian, Marlon, Don, and also to Liddell and Otis for jumping in. It's a very informative program. Thank you for spending your time with us, and thank you everyone for participating today.
I just want to close the meeting by thanking everyone for being here and thanking this wonderful panel. I just am continually impressed by the collaboration that is going on in our county. It seems to get better and better. And thank you all for working together and for finding common ground and working toward common goals. That is the best way, no doubt.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share what we're doing.
Thank you.
We do work for you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for the opportunity.